Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I apologize for the slow Wi Fi connection on my end, but at least you can hear me. And I welcome you to this wonderful show where we talk about global affairs, innovation, and increasingly turbulent world economically, politically. And things are moving in the United States of America in terms of bad weather, which just hit us today in North Carolina, but also just Donald Trump's indictment, the politics of our nation, and where we're headed. Gun violence is definitely something that's continuing to get worse, has a lot of people nervous, particularly with the shootings in Louisville. Moving forward, I'll be giving a wrap up of the week every Friday since most COVID restrictions have been lifted, and it will be hard to manage the show every day. But every Friday, I'll be doing a wrap up of the week. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of things before I give you my insight and my monologue on a major event I'm bringing to Mooresville next week. Today, there's been a spy that's been caught. We're going to talk about that in terms of leaking documents on the Russian-Ukraine war. It turns out that there's also been a leak about China sending weapons to Russia, even though they're saying that they're neutral in the Russia-Ukraine war. Another topic which I'd love to get our conservatives to weigh on is the Biden White House looking to extend healthcare benefits from the Affordable Care Act to the DACA immigrants in our country, which could make for very interesting political debate. And we're going to be talking about a number of other major issues that are going on in the U.S. And around the world. Today, I want to open up my monologue on an event that I've got coming next week to Mooresville in North Carolina, which is the eighth largest state. And I greet you live from Mooresville. I always say that. I forgot to do that today. And this is a small business administration event with the Indian Embassy. And the goal is to focus on the Indian American diaspora small business community. This actually is an effort, and I'm going to be extending an invitation to Gabe Esparza, who's the head of international trade for the Biden administration next week, to talk about their work with the diaspora or immigrant communities. Last year, they did a successful event in Seattle with the primary focus on helping businesses who are exporting from Seattle to Korea. It was with the Korean community. And when I met Gabe, when I met Vice President Harris a few months ago in January in Raleigh, he had told me that they were looking at an Indian American event. And they were looking at Charlotte, Seattle, and Houston and other cities in the United States. But I convinced him he had to do Mooresville. I talked about not only are there millions of Indians in the U.S. Significantly contributing to small business and innovation, but a third of our town is Indian in Mooresville, many, many entrepreneurs. And I reminded him that 14 out of the last 84 unicorns or billion-dollar companies were actually founded by Indian immigrants, but we have a significant growing community of entrepreneurs here. So hence came the U.S.-India Business Connection. This is going to be a great event. The Indian Embassy is coming, leaders from the Biden administration are coming, and small businesses from all walks of life, healthcare, hospitality, retail, and yes, a lot of technology. And we're going to be having panels about trade, access to capital, tourism, hearing from successful entrepreneurs. I'm going to do my best to send the recordings to the individuals here, and we will go ahead and make it happen in terms of getting Roku to perhaps stream some of this event. I am so excited about small businesses. Wherever you are around the world, think about how many jobs you're creating. For every company we create 6 jobs. That's about 450,000 jobs in North Carolina just last year because we incorporated 93,000. I think that this is a significant way to accelerate jobs and grow our economy, particularly in the United States of America as we continue to deal with rising inflation, gas prices, rising home prices, and people not wanting to go back to work. But perhaps we can get them to start companies. Think about an idea, bring it to market, take some risk. Maybe you'll find some reward and some satisfaction along the way. Now, Mark, let's go ahead and get started with our show. And we'll talk for a few minutes about the event. Mark, I'm ready to go.
All right, sounds good. Sounds like it's going to be an amazing event. I did get the email. One of the gentlemen said he was going to be out of town today, but we might try to get him on Monday. So I did see that reply to your request to have somebody come on and talk about this amazing event. So we definitely look forward to it. I know a lot of conversations have been around infrastructure and other infrastructure kind of issues and things, not just here in North Carolina, but around the nation and around the world. I did see, and I don't know what Nick's thoughts about this are, but there was a Supreme Court decision that was going on today as well. And some of our conservatives may have thoughts about this, but apparently, for those that have been trying to get student loans and trying to get those student loans forgiven, they definitely had a recent decision that will allow that to move forward. And I know that Nick Palvedo, one of our founders of this network, talks about student loans and some of the things that go on in that space. So, Nick, what is your thoughts? And Dan might have some thoughts as well, but I did see that on the news recently where they were saying that, let's go ahead and forgive these billions in student loans and to move forward on that decision.
Bad idea. I mean, student loans in general are a bad idea. Forgiving them is just a worse idea. The United States is broke. I mean, we just don't get it. And we've had those discussions on David Walker's show. We're 31 trillion in the hole. Biden, as much as we love him, is going to put the U.S. 2.8 more trillion in the hole. Medicare is scheduled to go broke at the end of the year, and Social Security will go broke next decade. All right. Now, putting that all in context, now what we want to do is forgive student loans. Okay, it's just more of the government is financially, it just shows that this government is not a financially sound government. The Chinese have used it to their advantage in the recent thing that happened last week when I was overseas. Not only did they create BRICS, which is a very strong political force against America, they also pointed out that America is not sound financially due to their national debt, and hence the yuan, which is the Chinese currency, is taking over as the reserve currency in the world. So chalk that up to just poor mismanagement by the United States government. I'd like to hear, this is the liberal speaking, I'd like to hear from my conservative friend Dan Worthington this time, while you go forward to Dan.
Good job, Joe. Further destroying our country and undermining its interests around the world, and punishing those who are trying to make a living and striving to make their lives better in the United States. Now, the jackass wants to give health benefits to people who are here illegally, these DACA people, 560,000 of them. How much is that going to cost us, right? So it's like Uncle Joe is like the good old uncle that likes to hand out the money on the corner. The problem is, if it was his money, that'd be all right. It's not. It's our money. We're the taxpayers of the United States. He's destroying this country. He's undermining us with our allies. He's undermining our currency. This is all part of a deliberate plan with respect to the financial reset in the world. And it's going to hurt Americans big time. And so that's what I have to say about that. Now, with respect to the disclosures in the classified documents, what we've learned is we have troops on the ground in Ukraine who are engaged in an undeclared war. We also know that Ukraine isn't winning, that at best it's a stalemate, and Ukraine is in peril. And they're losing a lot more people than has been reported, both on Pod TV and in the general media. And so we've been lied to, right, by the U.S. government and about the war. Big surprise. But do we hear any uproar about it like there was at the time of the Vietnam War and all the reporting in the Pentagon Papers? No, we don't hear that. That what they're trying to do, and this guardsman, I have no what's the word? Feelings of sorrow for the guy. He shouldn't have released that information. It endangered national security. But the truth is, now the truth is out there. American people deserve to know what's actually happening in Ukraine and where our billions and billions of dollars are going, and why it's at best a a neutral effect. It's not really been a successful enterprise like we'd all like to think it was.
Hold on one second, because we do have Sasha, and I'm sure Sasha has some thoughts, because I know he has his show on Mondays, and I know a lot of times he and Ivan, who reports from Ukraine, talk about how great the Ukrainian cultures have been,
hold on.
and also
it's what the document said. I mean, I'm not making this crap up.
Have you seen these documents,
document
Dan?
said.
Have you seen the documents? Were they corrected in substantially, in fact?
No, actually,
No.
I have.
No, they
I
were
have-
corrected. And
Sasha,
all these
I have
documents,
seen-
too,
I
they
have seen
benefit only one
Sasha,
player,
I have,
it's Russia.
I have seen the documents. I have seen them,
Yes, were they?
and they weren't substantially corrected.
They were substantially corrected. No,
Have
they
you seen,
were.
Sasha? Have you
The
seen them?
analysis of this document
Sasha,
shows that they were
Sasha,
substantially corrected.
Have you seen them?
No,
you
I haven't seen them.
I have.
Well, I've read and listened to many
Yeah, I know.
analysts whom I trust. And even if I would see them,
Now,
how
who
I
was
would
that?
qualify.
CNN, CNBC, right?
No, I'm talking about
Not the
Ukrainian
analyst?
and Russian, even Russian sources showing that the documents were substantially corrected. They're not authentic documents. For example, the losses of Ukrainians were grossly exaggerated, and Russian losses were actually getting to 1/10 of what they really are. And I'm following Russian losses on a Ukrainian Pravda, which is a daily internet source. And
My point is
how
my-
much they.
my point is this: we've been lied to by the United States military and this administration. To what extent?
True.
I don't
It's not
know.
true. No, it's not true. The
Not
administration
true.
and primarily Pentagon, they're doing the job that they are required to do. And that what justifies $1 trillion military budget of the United States. Because if it's not, then cut it, in not even in half, in 2/3 of it, you have to cut it and just leave secretaries counting the money. And that's all what you need, really. Because you see, unfortunately, United States even don't understand what is their role in this Ukrainian war and what's really happening. What's happened is that United States in the last 20 years or so squandered all its advantages that they have ever had in the world: soft power, military power, financial power. Everything is going and gone. And this book about whether U.S. superpower will be by 2040, it's a joke. Is that superpower right now as we speak? They're losing every war, every battle whenever they get messed around. If they will get in Ukraine, let Ukraine do the war itself because it has chances to win. If US will get involved, Ukraine will lose, that's for sure, because they don't know how to fight. They don't want to fight. And American people, they don't know what they want. And American elite, unfortunately, they don't understand what.
So you make my point.
Okay, that's fine. If your point is my point, I'm glad to do. I'm glad to make it.
No, you make my point. So why are we involved at all?
I just started to answer that because America has to preserve its role as a superpower, and for the last 20 years it squandered it all, and right now is the only time when it can inflict very serious damage to its enemy number one, which is Russia, not China at all, because China is with all the shortcomings, it's still market economy and successfully competes with the United States. So United States has to at least get rid of one of its major, or probably the main enemies, which is Russia. And Ukrainians are doing exactly that. So instead of helping
while we've been,
we don't know, we are scared, or as they go, they could go
while we've been squandering billions of dollars in Ukraine, the Chinese have been going behind our backs, trying to shift the world reserve currency from the dollar to the yuan, and undermining the United States' interest in return.
Exactly.
And you say that it's not that they're not our enemy. primarily Russia is.
Yes.
I
Without
think, okay, so China and Russia are allies. China has been providing arms to the Russians in the Ukrainian conflict.
unproven. No, that's unproven.
We learned that as well.
That's unproven
So,
at all.
well, that's what
They could supply, and
that's
they
what the Pentagon papers
supply,
say.
but so far, China is very careful not to supply directly arms to Russia. So
Well,
far,
according to the disclosures, that's exactly what happened.
I don't see this disclosure as a
One thing that the U.S. needs to address is BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now,
Right.
notice, and I know Steve has just left, India is on the list. Okay,
absolutely.
and so we have to realize: are they our friends or not? Because
They're not.
BRICS, pardon?
They're not our friend.
Right.
They're not,
because
and
BRICS
China
is-
and Russia are enemies.
BRICS is an
Others are-
alliance of, now listen to these countries that are allied against us: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, of all the places. Okay. And they're the ones that are conspiring to basically make the yuan the leading reserve currency in the world to replace the dollar. Now, David Walker has warned that this is going to happen, just like we warn on our shows. That
Absolutely.
Medicare are going broke. Instead, what happens on major media today, as I watched it, they discuss the important issues of the United States, like transgender rights, civil rights, and all this other stuff. Well, guess what? The future will be, what do the Chinese tell us to do? And then you're going to do as China does. That's the future of America, and that's where we're heading.
Nick, I would like to add something, that it's not just BRIC countries. There are several countries which are silent for now, but they all hate United States, and we are talking about perhaps Indonesia and Thailand, Burma, or just probably 100 countries which are not stating openly, but in fact, all of them hate United States.
Right.
I've been in many of these countries. They do hate United States, period.
Yep.
So in this environment, it's right now to hit a heavy blow to Russia, and this way America would show their role of a superpower. Nobody can touch America, and especially when they have Ukrainians doing its job, just helping a little bit to do it. That's all. You don't even have to send troops. By the way, the United States have two very strong brigades. One is in Poland and one is in Romania, 20,000 strong, superbly equipped, and in fact ready to fight anytime. They can fight even as early as today. So if that's a scary part, or this is
We have black ops operators in Ukraine right now, and we have had all along.
Yeah.
Hey, Kim and Nick and everybody, one of the things that I saw, and I wish Steve was still here during the pandemic, because yes, folks are getting busy and getting back to work, but there was a trend that was taking place during the pandemic as well. And I don't know if y'all noticed this trend, and it actually comes to something that Sasha was talking about, but some of those countries that were perceived to be the enemies of the state, the enemies of the United States, were also doing a very active push to recruit expatriates to come to said countries. Because I did notice that a lot of people, even from the United States, were traveling to, say, Thailand, to, say, a number of the other countries that are not our friends, supposedly, but they were being recruited to come into those countries to live a quote-unquote better life. And I do know some folks, including some that have been on the network, that traveled to some of those countries, because Billy actually went there before coming back to Texas and all in that space. But I was just wondering what your thoughts about that were, because it did seem that there was a push to get folks to not just love their country, but also be recruited to come to these other countries during the pandemic. And there was like, it's a
Mark, I would like to remind you that several years ago there was a great American world chess champion by the name Robert James Fischer. And when he traveled, he had one rule. He would never travel to a country which does not have American military base. Because only American military base can provide some security for you. And you are not going to be thrown to jail, interrogated unlawfully, and so on. So that was his rule. And well, you can see now what's happened to U.S. journalist Gershkovich, who was caught by Russians and now is in Russian jail, waiting almost 2 months for his trial. And there's nothing United States can
But
do.
we also love countries that have a strong U.S. dollar or a strong U.S. dollar connection. I don't know that there are any military bases, and y'all that are in the military can correct me, in Dubai. But I do know that Dubai is a monarchy and a very strong monarchy, and they are definitely recruiting a number of people to come there because it's supposed to be a fantastic looking and modern country, but it is literally in the middle of the Middle East. But it is recruiting everybody from musicians to executives and engineers and a number of others to come to that part of the world. So they definitely are, like I said, in the middle of the desert. But I've heard great things about it. I think maybe even Nick made a stop over there or in his world tour.
I wanted to support Nick's statement that there was an article specifically on what he mentioned. I like the way Nick worded it better, but you can follow this author and journalist, Eddie Dames, on LinkedIn. But he's been keeping track of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and how they're developing a new currency to rival against the US dollar. So when you have several countries uniting together, and that's something we can't even do in our own country. And I think it was David Walker who even said this the other day, that they don't even attack us anymore. They don't have to, because they know we're going to just erupt and destroy ourselves. We're divided. We're divided by two. None of the states are united to have any of the laws the same. You can go into any state and it's going to be different. I feel like I have to read a different constitution every time I go to a different state. But I think we need to wake up. And I think the new woke needs to be, we need to unite as a country, and we need to get smart. And we need to not replay history and let our economy go down. We just keep rewriting history while China rewrites its new borders. Okay, they keep growing, and we just keep going down and in. You know, we keep rewriting laws against women and everything. We need to wake up, and we need to get smart. And Sasha's right. We need to start funding the right things. I don't know that it's funding a war, but we need to start taking a look and putting our priorities in place, because we haven't.
Kim,
And we're letting a small group of people, our leaders, do this to us. And yeah, I think Russia will own us in 10, 20 years. Yeah, China, Russia, they got enough people.
But it's not just the Democrats that are doing things as well, because there are certain Republicans that are jumping in the fray.
I didn't say Republican or Democrat.
I was actually referring more to what Dan
Okay, so
Marjorie
let me
Taylor
make
Greene
something.
Wake up. The
came to the
Chinese
defense of the
they have all
person that
intention
did the leaks and
to
everything.
be
So
the
I didn't
leaders
know
of the
what
world. So we need
Dan's
a
thoughts
new
were
world.
about
Get rid of the
Crazy
old world.
Marjorie. And yes, I
Wake
did
up.
call her Crazy Marjorie.
Let's make it perfectly clear. Our leaders are owned by foreign powers
They have heavy
and
lobbyists.
foreign influence. They could give
That's
a rat's-
united. That's
they could
who's
give
going
a
to
rat's
win.
ass
That's
less
united.
about us. It's a part of the power elite and these wealthy groups that get together to decide world policy. For all these leaders of these foreign powers are there too, discussing the future of humanity, and it isn't anything about us. It's about them.
Dan, is this anything new? I mean, there
among
was
thieves.
colonialism forever that involved several European countries. There is definitely the notion of multinational corporations that have been out there forever and have definitely been doing some damage in the world.
Mark, the problem is it's risen to a new level. where our humanity, our individual freedom, our liberty, and our being able to be self-determining is being undermined by these people who are hungry for power and influence, and for these people we elect who are on the dole and are part of the system to get wealthy and get bought with influence by K Street companies that do the lobbying and all the should be illegal crap that goes on that's against the best interest of the American people. And we find and we don't have a true and transparent system of news anymore. Everything is controlled by media conglomerates.
5 companies control all the media in the United States.
And most of them are represented on the Council on Foreign Relations. That's the problem. Is there's an agenda. We, the American people, are not a part of that agenda. It's a world-wide agenda, a one world order agenda, and the power players and the people are moving the pieces are not us. And until we quote unquote wake up, like you said, and that's not woke, because I hate that stupid word woke. We need to wake up and embrace our freedom, our liberty, and our faith in order to be able to overcome these evil people who are working together to try to undermine our freedom.
We need to wake up and set our priorities.
They want to undermine the United States of America, Dan. Okay, because they see that we're the world's superpower. China wants to be the new world superpower, and China has a plan to become the world superpower. In the meantime, our country is asleep at the wheel. And
no, we're not asleep. Our leaders are actively supporting what's going on.
Yeah.
All this
India
is done
part
deliberately.
of this BRICS alliance. Steve. Hello, Steve. Hello.
Yes.
This is their plan. This is their plan.
It's Brazil, India, China.
Shame on India. Shame on India.
Africa.
Well, I think India is not making up their foreign policy, and I want to shift into the DACA healthcare coverage, but the bottom line is that India
They're
is
all
not
joined together.
India is part of BRICS.
India
is part of BRICS.
It is. It's the
Doesn't
I
mean
in
all
BRICS.
Indian people are. It just means India has taken a stand as a country against the U.S.
China and Russia.
Moda, right?
Well, I think India. I think India has always been an ally of the former Soviet Union and Russia during the Cold War, and I think what's happened is that even though they're the world's largest democracy, they're trying to play it on both sides of the fence. They want to have a relationship with the U.S. We've heard Mr. Chatterjee talk about the U.S.-India nuclear deal. We've talked about democracy in the Southern Asia Pacific, but at the same time, they're not calling out what's going on in Russia. And first of all, they're buying oil from Russia still, and so because that keeps their economy going, and they are the 5th largest economy in the world. So, I think that this is something that the State Department of India and the U.S. are going to have to work out.
Well, they're out to screw the United States, Steve.
Yeah, well, they need to make it
the United States.
But I think in the long term, that's not. Yeah, that's not good though.
The United States.
But in many ways, that's not good for. It's in India's best interest to have a pro-U.S. foreign policy.
You go tell them that, buddy. You go tell them
they're part of BRICS.
You need to tell them that because that's not how they're behaving.
Pro-American policy.
No,
and you can't straddle a fence, Steve, and survive. Ask any man who straddles a fence. You can't straddle a fence.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what's under the legs. That's why you can't straddle a fence.
It does seem that India was more pro-U.S. when Trump was in the White House. So I don't know if that's what's driving.
I don't think so. This has been evolving since Trump. All of this evolved. Things don't evolve overnight like this. Not United Nations that unite together to go against a country.
That's because we're weak and we have no leadership.
We have no leadership for 20 years. In 20 years, we've had no leadership.
The New World Order: Russia, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. The BRICS.
Yeah, and remember the 1,000 points of light that were talked about by George Bush Sr. and the New
1,000
World
points of
Order?
light.
Here we
1,000
are.
points of light.
Here we are, and that's exactly what it's about. And the World Monetary System, everything has been moving in that
Sasha,
direction.
it's
But
like
Dan,
just
and Sasha and everybody,
isolating
how are you going to stop that when there are, I forget how many billions of people in China and how many billions of people in India? Brazil also has a sizable population as well. So we're really talking about the vast majority of the world population.
So what we do, Mark, is bend over and take it, right? Is that what you're
I'm not
telling
saying
us?
that.
Well,
I'm not
that's what
saying
you're
that.
saying.
Push up on your
I'm not
neighbor.
saying that at all. I'm just saying what is the counter? Because if you go to any country in America, I don't care whether it's, any city in America, I don't care whether it's Durham, I don't care whether it's Raleigh, I don't care whether it's Charlotte, I don't care whether it's New York, I don't care whether it's LA or any of the other cities, including some that are heavily Republican based and heavily Democratic based. A lot of the land and the property has been bought by who? They are a major real estate planner. They're a major real estate developer. So are you going to stop them from investing in the country and all?
Yes, that's what you do.
But how do you do that? That's what I'm asking you. How do you do that
You
legally?
make it illegal for them to purchase land in the United States because they're a foreign power and they're our enemy.
Sasha has a comment since he came from the former Soviet Union. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
Okay, my comment is this. You will not get United States united, really. It's impossible in this environment, in this fight with Democrats and Republicans. It will go on forever. And it would have been much better to have a civil
grow
war.
up.
It would be in a year
Grandma,
or
man.
two, there would be a winner, there would be a loser, and then everything would go back. But it's not going to happen because it's not clearly divided. So even if it's civil war, there is no clear line that you can put a division between Republican and Democrats. And okay, you stay here, we stay there, and the end of the story. It's impossible because of geography. So now what United States really needs to heal this problem is a war. A war, because the war will unite everybody. The war will make America great again. Now, why the war is inevitable?
That's
I'll
what
tell
we
you why.
need. A war.
I'll tell you why it's inevitable. What's happened in Ukraine is that a major nuclear superpower cannot take over much smaller and weaker country. That should not be done ever, because when you have nuclear arsenal of Russia, one of two things must work. A, intimidation, a threat of use nuclear weapons. And if it fails, then you actually use it. You cannot allow a country with such substantial nuclear arsenal to lose a war against non-nuclear country. It's never. So therefore, the sooner or later, the nuclear weapons will be used in Ukraine. So now the West was threatening, if that would happen, we will destroy the Black Sea Fleet. We will destroy all your forces. It remains to be seen if and when and how it will be done. But it comes time when the nuclear weapons definitely will be used.
But Sasha, along those same lines, and we talked about the BRICS countries, there is another country that is out there as well. It has a leader that is not seen as being all that mentally fit in a lot of ways. And definitely some folks have gone to visit him, including a former famous basketball player. But, he does just recently tested a new solid fuel intergalactic ballistic missile. So he does have an ICBM. So do we need to be worried about the area of North Korea? That's a very small country, but they apparently have some very powerful weapons. And they've already said that they are going to make their enemies experience, quote unquote, a clearer security crisis and constantly strike extreme uneasiness and horror into them by taking fatal and offensive counteractions until they abandon their senseless and reckless act. That was
North Korea is completely controlled by China. And without China, they will not do a thing. They will not move left or right or do anything at all. So
They're a proxy. Yeah, they're a proxy.
I wouldn't worry about North Korea at all.
We're not worried about them. Why are we having these Japanese, the U.S., and other maneuvers that are going on off the
We do
coast?
it all the time, Mark. They're annual.
Okay.
Also, what I can see will happen is there will be definitely and very quickly proliferation of nuclear weapons around the world. The first two candidates are Japan and South Korea. Because obviously, if Ukraine would have today
They
nuclear,
probably have them already.
no, Ukraine or is Japan you're talking about?
No, Japan and South Korea
Quite,
probably
quite
already
possible,
have
or they're
nuclear
developing it. I'm not sure, but that's definitely next two countries which for sure will need to have a nuclear arsenal. So it works this way: if Ukraine would retain its nuclear arsenal, which was given up in 1994 thanks to a great U.S. swindle to assure Ukrainians about some kind of guarantees or whatever it might be, and they never acted on that. So Ukraine lost its nuclear arsenal, and you see the consequences of it today. Well, it started in 2014 with occupation of Crimea. Neither event would ever happen if Ukraine would have a nuclear arsenal. They would just explode its arsenal over the Russian invaders. Of course, now they don't have it, so U.S. sort of, they're not even officially saying that they are trying to help Ukraine based on their pledges of 1994, this memorandum, so-called.
Ukraine is perfectly capable of developing nuclear arms.
No, they definitely have the ability. But Sasha, and I want to come back to something that Sasha said earlier, because I personally think that we may have already had it. I don't know what Kim or Nick are going to think about what I'm going to say and everything. But, about 10 years ago, there was a movement that was out there. It was a movement not around the race. It was actually a movement around class and wealth and everything. So I technically think that we may have already had at least one version of the Civil War when the whole Occupy movement was going on and all in that space. Because you remember that it was definitely a divided country, and a lot of people, they were in uproars in a lot of the major urban cities, and they were attacking the banks and the financial institutions because they felt that there was a disparity between those that are extremely wealthy and the rest of society. So it might have already been a semi-civil war during the Occupy.
Okay, so is all the jobless kids of the wealthy people that were in New York doing that? So it's that was backed by Obama and his community support organizations. I don't remember what it was called. It was all a sham. You know it. I know it. Now, the Antifa movement and all of the things that happened after the thing in Minnesota happened were also funded and organized and a react. So yeah, that was actually far worse because of the violence and the destruction than that other movement, which was basically a no-burger. I mean, it didn't accomplish a thing, right?
I mean, it was supposed to be dealing with things like housing. It's supposed to be dealing with things like a number of the other issues that are going on. I know folks, including myself, that were involved.
It really made a big impact, didn't it?
With a number of issues. I did not say it was impactful, but as y'all recall, it was also going roughly at the same time as a nationalistic movement, because y'all talked about that America needs to be more nationalistic and everything, and there's definitely been countries around the world that have been part of that whole Brexit and nationalistic movement. And I think even Steve had brought up that there are quite a few countries that are come to my country, love it and leave it, love it or leave it kind of attitude. And it sounds like that is what y'all are suggesting exists with everybody in America.
Well, that's what everybody, it sounds like that's what's happening around the world, Mark.
That was my point, is that the world seems to be going in that direction. Is that, but I don't know what Lee's thoughts are or Steve's thoughts, but it does seem like there is a very much a movement toward nationalism around the world.
Mark,
yeah.
you brought up my name. I just want to speak real quickly. Kim brought up the United Nations, I believe, and Nick brought up Burks, the different countries that we should be concerned about. Am I the only one concerned that we're giving over power to the United Nations and that we're not going to longer be in control of our country in terms of if they just declare a pandemic for whatever reason?
Who?
United Nations and the WHO. Both of
Yeah,
them.
that's what I was saying.
But along this, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up because that's the question I was going to ask Nick. It's something that Steve said at the beginning, both today and I think he was on here yesterday as well. And we got into the whole gun debate. But I'm going to bring up a area that's going to be loving for our censors on that sometimes follow what goes on TV. But when you traveled around the world and all in that space, we do know that here the president has said that the national emergency is over. We do know that it is a sense that more people are going back to work, whether that's hybrid work, whether that's going back to the
Not as
regular
much
office and everything. But is the pandemic over globally? Nick, you just came back from traveling the world. I've not been out of the country in a minute. So.
At least in the 2 areas I was in last month, Spain and Morocco, the pandemic is kind of over with. But what isn't over with is a real problem: the United States losing its superpower status to China. Okay, this is a real problem, and our media doesn't address it.
But isn't it true that China's economy is slowing down, though?
It might be, but Steve, we also have to realize that BRICS is real. That's Brazil, Russia. That's our big friend, right? India. Is our friend or not? I question this now, and I know you're welcoming the Indian community in, but they need to be confronted with whose friend are they? Are they going to be our friend or Russia's friend?
They're complicit.
China definitely is not our friend. Go to Understanding China website. Everybody here, go onto it. It's on a Facebook group. They're real Chinese from real China who all hate us. Okay?
But in that same question, hold on a second.
Many of them are here.
Hold on a second. I got to ask y'all another question. I got to ask you another question, though, Nick.
Mark, they hate you.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I got to
don't
ask you
even know you, Mark, but they hate you. Okay,
I know that, but I got to ask you another question in relation to that.
They hate you, Mark.
There is another part of the world that you just mentioned that gets compared. You just mentioned it gets compared. Their leadership does to Trump and all in that space, and they are not actually loved by their own people. And I'm going to talk about Brazil because
they're not even close.
That are Brazilian, and they're not loved by their own people and their own leaders.
They have a plan to take over the world. The Chinese are not Trump. They actually have a 5-year plus long-term plan to take over the world and put the West in their place.
Absolutely. We need to be
subservient to China, baby. Subservient.
We need to be eating each other just like
and they're doing a good job at it. As I tell Sasha,
that's it.
If you look at the chess player, who's winning? It's China. Okay, they're winning everywhere. Who's losing? The United States of America, because they're not woke. They need to wake up. You can get rid of woke. Wake up, buddy. You're going to be speaking Chinese in the next 10 years.
Nick, it's not just China's winning. We're letting them win. We're not even in the game.
Why
are we doing all the manufacturing there?
Lee, we don't even know that there's a game being played out there. And
actually, our leaders
we're totally
exactly what's happened, and they're complicit in it. They're owned.
Yeah.
Our leaders are owned.
And the media doesn't help because they never bring up the issue because they don't want to offend the Chinese. You never want to.
They're owned as well. They're owned as well.
Yes, I mean it's just a crazy time, and I think we need to. I think this is a good conversation to have with Mr. Chatterjee and the Congress.
Yeah, I mean we're going to have that conversation. If he dares shows up on Pod TV, we are going to have that conversation because we need to know where India stands. Right now, it looks like they stand with the Chinese and the Russians.
But we could get our delegation, in North Carolina and across the country to, the Congress and Senate to force this conversation. And I think pressure on the Modi administration. I mean, look, but here's the catch. India does want to continue to develop their U.S.-India, their nuclear capability, and they're better off doing that with the strides they've made in the United States. So there could be negotiation tactics to push away from that, which would hurt India, and they've got
Pakistan. We need to separate India from Russia and China. Period. The end. Right. Okay. Right. No matter what we need to do, if we have to drill more oil here in the United States to give them more oil, whatever we have to do, we need to separate.
That's a great point. Hey, real
China.
quickly, a quick topic switch. We're going to come back to that. What about? And I don't know where Dan Worthington stands on this, but the Biden administration is now saying that they want to extend healthcare benefits to DACA recipients.
At what cost? At what cost?
Who's going to
gonna
pay for
that?
Steve, who's
gonna
going to pay for that? Are you going to pay for that?
Yeah,
you
I
know what I
are.
think we should do? Anybody who wants to pay for it can pay for it. Okay? I don't have any problem with it. So Steve,
Meanwhile, both
you can pay for it.
legislators,
We can have a DACA tax.
both
As long as I don't have
legislators,
to pay for it, I don't care. Go ahead and do it. Have
both
Biden
legislators.
come up. Let him pay for it. Let the Democratic Party pay for it. If
And then
they won't.
There's been efforts in Florida. I forgot in my monologue to say that in Florida, the big news they're talking about right now in North Carolina is what's going to happen with abortion law. Florida has now restricted abortion to 6 weeks, with limited time to 6 weeks from 12. There is a rumor that North Carolina is going to be going into session very soon to do that. Of course, they have a supermajority now, so they can pretty much do whatever they want. And the abortion pill I think they've lifted the ban on that now from a federal court of appeals, but that's the other. So a lot of these battles are
Steve and Dan, I've got a question for
What
both
does
of you.
China do on abortion? Hey guys, does anyone know what China's rules on abortion? We should
Well,
adopt.
they had the one child law, and then
No
they,
more. No
and then
more.
they let go of that. That's what they said. There was a law, and then they got let go of it.
Yeah, but they got people who are cannibalizing their own people in certain parts of the country because they can't feed their own people. So their system of government really hasn't. It's helped the upper class in China, the elite in China, but it's at the cost in penalizing the remainder of their people. This is the kind of thing they want for us and the rest of the world.
I have the new rule. Here's going to be the rule on abortion. It's going to be legal and generally accessible nationwide because abortions are available to women in China's family planning program, public hospitals, private hospitals, and clinics. China was the first developing country to legalize abortions and make it easily accessible in the 1950s. So we're just going to have legalized abortion, period, the end. China says so.
That's because China says so.
That's what China says. So, but China also, as I
You might as
recall,
well look to China.
They don't care about killing babies there.
No,
Doesn't matter.
but man, part of the conversation
Yeah,
around
it's China
China, and
rules.
I've had
Just-
folks that have visited that country and everything, is that we paint them as being a purely communist country and a purely socialist country, but they are a very westernized nation, and they got things like McDonald's and some of our companies that are in there in a regular basis. So while we're busy kicking them out, according to Dan's theory and everything, are we also going to pull out of their country? Because we have definitely put a lot of our Western influences, including our music and other things, in their country. So is this going to go both ways? I'm just asking because there are folks that are doing those, watching on those China Facebook groups that want to know. So we're
Okay. Okay. So Mark, you're being very naive about how this works, because there's a difference between U.S. corporate interests and U.S. public policy and political power and political policy, right? So China, it's not. It's all the same. Their public policy and political policy and all that is all the same. It's united on a united front. So if Apple, for example, decides it wants to do business in China, it'll do business in China if China wants them to do business there. If McDonald's wants them to do business, McDonald's will be there and they'll do business. China decides exactly what it wants and what it doesn't want. And what it doesn't want, it doesn't let in. What it wants, it lets in.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that we should be doing. If we don't want them to
And-
buy
and-
land in the United States, we should say, no, you're
Right.
not going to buy
And
that. You
Tesla,
don't want to
by
buy
the
that
way,
port? Yeah.
Tesla has basically turned over everything to China.
But
I
there's
mean,
an old
Elon Musk is
trick. There's an
basically-
old trick in corporate
Even put a
America.
big plant.
There's an old trick in corporate America, and I think the Chinese have,
In Mexico.
and others have
Ford
mastered
took
it.
everything out of China. Ford
How-
took everything out of China. Yay, Ford.
We're dead.
Go
But how are
Ford.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ford took everything out. But how
Three
are you
cheers.
going to stop it? It's very easy if there is a person of Chinese descent that is buying the land. But that a lot of times these are corporations that have mixed staff and mixed folks that are in there. So it's not always the known fact that it is a Chinese corporation that is buying the land, because they can definitely, hide, just like a lot of people can hide.
Mark, if they can buy our politicians, they can buy the land.
That's
They can
why
buy
they
the
can
politicians. They
land.
can
Hey,
switch
hey.
up on folks. There's enough ways to.
I
Lee,
have a
it's
way
easier
to
to buy the
fix-
politicians. It's easier
Here's
to
a
buy
way
the
to fix
politicians.
our economy.
They're cheaper.
Start inspiring the big corporations and small businesses to do only business in the U.S. and with the U.S. and buy U.S. made only products. All right. Start bringing everything back to America. Period. Do everything in America only. And if you want to be part of BRICS,
Well-
then go be part of BRICS. But you
But, I
will
mean,
not
there's
be
been- but
part
there's
of
been
America.
efforts- there've
But
been
we need
efforts
to stop
Ni hao.
giving more inspiration to big corporations for doing business in China and for doing
But not just
business
China, but I mean, there
that
have been efforts
produces
to
our
do.
quality.
There've
Well, that's a
been
great way for me to
do
close
business
out. And
in Mexico, in Africa, with different people and everything. So you're saying that we don't need to do business with other countries in general? That doesn't make any sense, Kim.
well,
I
let me
didn't say in general. I said countries that want to work with us, countries
let's
that
close.
want to build us up. Put people in your life that want
Rabble
you to win,
rouser.
that want to build you, and you want to build them. That's
But Kim-
that's the
But
philosophy.
Kim,
They don't want to
already
work
ha-
with us, then don't.
well, I'm going to close out with a final
Why?
insight before I leave today, just as a segue into what I was going to say today. But Kim, the good news, and please, Mark, put me on solo if you could, because I know people are going to disagree with what I say. But it is clear, and the numbers do show, Kim, that this is already happening in the United States. Over the last 2 years, the administration has brought in over $400 billion of manufacturing jobs to the United States, investment. And actually, $16 billion of that has come into North Carolina. The most recent being VinFast in Chatham County. A large reason of this is not only the ARP plan and the infrastructure, but the CHIPS Act, which is being run by.
Oh, you're
Dr.
so
Ronnie-
full of bull.
No, but it is. Dr. Ronnie Chatterjee, who implements the CHIPS Act, has said, and I've met him, I'm going to try to bring him on the show, that we are actually manufacturing more chips in the U.S. They're giving some of the money that's going into Wolfspeed's expansion is actually coming from the CHIPS Act. So this is a good thing. Now, I will credit President Trump, former President Trump, for beginning this conversation, which I think actually enabled President Biden to actually follow suit on that. So I will give the president credit that Donald J. Trump was the president of the United States that came in and said exactly what you're saying, Kim. I think he got a little bit off track with what he was doing on Twitter and what he was doing on Facebook and all the other things that were going on. But
That's
I
because
do
they were
believe-
beating the hell out of him.
But I do believe that I do believe manufacturing is coming back in the U.S. and we are on the right track. So we can debate that next week. But Kimberly, I want to thank you for bringing that great point up. Wonderful. We'll talk about this next week.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I just want to
Thank you.
add the few things that Trump and I agree on. I don't hate Trump. I just didn't like him as a president.
Well, as a
there's
person,
difference
actually,
there.
as
There's a
a
whole
person.
difference.
You liked him as
I
a
mean,
president,
yeah.
not a person.
I didn't like him as a president.
Oh,
Did
really?
not.
There
Yeah.
are some good things that he did do. So
A lot of good things, yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
there are bad things he did. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they all do, though. It's a 50-50 balance. They all do good and bad. And if you say they don't, you're really delusional.
But he was elected,
The
and my
Trump
final
Kool-Aid.
statement is this before I leave, and I want to wish he was elected on the very fact that there were towns, because of NAFTA, because of the trade agreements, there were towns across America, cities, rural areas that were decimated. And we were just had moved everything from the manufacturing. So only now are we saying, let's bring the jobs back. I think the CHIPS Act is a good idea because someone asked me the other day on the radio, why are chips a big deal? I said, okay, think about it. During the supply chain crisis, we couldn't buy a
We
car
couldn't
for
do it.
sometimes a year. You get your washers, your dryers, and even from a national security perspective, our missiles, our drones. We don't want chips being manufactured in Taiwan where we can't even have our own drones and our own missile defense systems and our missiles for our military. So this is why chips are critically important, not only for our quality of life and buying things, but also for our national security. So
Steve, how about our
that's what-
pharmaceuticals? Same
and
thing.
pharmaceuticals too, yeah.
It
Yeah, I gotta
all, we
go.
should
I gotta
bring
go. This is an important
manufacturing
call.
back
I'll be back.
to the
Yeah.
U.S.
What about the pharmaceuticals?
Thank you,
Lee? 'Cause,
guys.
I mean,
Sorry.
See you,
Hey,
Steve.
buddy.
A lot of Mark, a lot of that's overseas, and there were shortages because China supplies them. They cut them off whenever they want.
Yeah, so anything that's strategic
100%.
strategic asset we need to produce here or have it available so that our people can get it. It's
Right.
only a matter of self-preservation, so that other countries cannot put a gun to our head with respect to those issues, and that we aren't limited for the things we need for drugs for our kids, diapers, other things.
Well, we
Many
gotta
of these
do a better job.
crises,
We got-
many of these crises were manufactured by government policy and supply chain regulation, limitations on truckers in California, loading docks in California, other places. A lot of these issues were exacerbated by Democratic politicians and their extreme policies in those states.
It's not
It's
just
part of the
Democratic
record.
politicians. It's
Yes, it
politicians-
actually is.
No, it's not. There have been politicians on both sides that have done some crazy things, including some of the rules around pharmaceuticals. I do have some friends that work in that industry as well, and they work for some of the U.S.
Legally or illegally?
legally.
Oh,
They work for
well,
like the
we're not talking
major
about
pharmaceutical companies that have some
That's not
major
illegal.
problems and all in that space, whether it's GlaxoSmithKline or whether it's some of the other
Just to
companies.
clarify,
well.
I want to make sure.
Yeah, you can make it clear how you want to, but yeah, they work. One of
Just
my
kidding.
best friends has actually been in that field for years. He's a major seller, but not of the illegal stuff, but of the legal stuff, because he goes all over the country and all over the world to actually make sure that the doctors are being supplied by our drugs. So in some ways, I guess she is a legal pusher and everything, because she's pushing our drugs to the folks around the world and all in that space. So I guess in that way, she might be considered a legal.
The candy man.
But Dan, does the government of the United States have a policy to have a list of vital interests that should be protected and manufactured in the United States? Did you see a plan by either
I don't see one, and they need
or
to
the
develop it.
Biden administration? Nobody's even talking about what you're discussing.
No, I think.
Okay, what happened is with the chips, it was earmarked, obviously by a lobbyist,
Yeah.
to have the chips over here. But you're correct. There are other things that are vital to American interests that should be manufactured in the United States. But there's no policy, no plan by our government as they.
And that's what I think we need to do.
Which
We
is
need
a
to
big mistake.
institute. We need to institute a plan.
They need to.
Absolutely.
Right. In other words, up to what
Well, y'all
things-
wrap up and everything. Me and
be-
Sasha are gonna bounce because we've got to have the Ukrainian show and all in that space. But y'all go ahead and continue. It's gonna
Love
take
you,
us a minute
Sasha
to
and
get over
Mark.
there.
See you guys on Monday.
Take care, guys.
But we need to wake up and we need to
we need a new
institutionalize some of these laws that say or give better incentives to companies who keep everything in the United States or with countries that are with us. It's just like all those inspirational phrases of, keep the people around you that love you. Don't keep your, we got to quit keeping China, Russia, India, and all those people who hate us around us, because they're not helping us. And these are bridges that have been burned years ago. And I think they just sit by patiently waiting for us to kill ourselves, and then they're going to take over. But I think we need to start being more strong within ourselves, build ourselves, and work with the people who work with us.
Right.
Period.
And
Hey, Nick,
lot of
can you make an
discipline.
acronym for the countries that work with us? And that'll be our word.
we need to have a
You can give us some
plan.
homework.
We need the countries that work with us. We need to know who they are. And let's make a word
Bucks.
out of it.
A lot of bucks. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
They have bricks.
Okay,
They have
Mexico
Belt
is
and
the
Road
US.
Initiative. Hey, Dan, they have bricks. They have the Belt and Road Initiative. China's
Yeah.
plan to take over the world, and we have nothing.
well,
Nothing.
let's
Nothing.
make a word. Let's start with a word. So there's Canada,
birds is a word.
Europe, US, or America, whichever one we want to use.
I guess MAGA's taken already.
But
Make
yeah, but
America
MAGA's not
great
about
Again.
it's not about the countries that work with us.
I get that. I get that.
I want the countries that we unite with, because
Well,
we can't
they
say
call
United
it- they
States
call it
because
the
our
West.
states don't unite. So nothing
I mean,
united about us.
I mean, they call it the West, okay? But what the West is, who knows? What does the West
We
have
need
in
to
terms of
Build the
plan?
country.
Yes, Frodo.
They
We
don't
need to
have
build
a
the
plan.
country so we look more
Did
powerful
you
than Britain.
did you see Congress, the Biden administration, come up with a plan, okay, to keep the United States currency.
Let's come up with a word.
Did they come up with anything? Yeah, they haven't come up with anything at all. And
Come
so
on, Nick, you can do it. You came up with bricks. You can
Nick,
do
nothing
it.
positive.
I didn't come up with bricks. Bricks is what China came up with. China is driving the world's leadership.
So we
right
need to come up with a word.
Okay. The United States. Well, what we need is our leaders
with
to
the word.
come up with. a
No,
word.
we need to come up with a leader.
Yeah, we need to come up with a
that'll-
leader, and we
that'll
don't have
have
any.
some guts.
And I want
yeah,
somebody who's working
stand up.
on our problem today, not somebody who's pointing fingers, making fun, and shaming. I want somebody who's actually working their butts off, going to legislation and saying, this is how we fix things. I don't want whiny babies going, he did this and he did this and he cheated and he cheated. Get over it. I want a real human, a real person, a person who has the courage to say, this is what we need to do. This is the formula and this is how we do it.
And
That's
maybe
That would
we
rule.
need.
That would
And maybe
rule
we'll
out.
We need
get
a
one.
That would
whiny
rule out
baby,
Biden and Trump.
courageless, whiny.
we're out of time, so we're
I know.
going to have to attack this problem next week.
Be awake.
Make sure by World Edition. Wake
Nick,
up.
just,
Wake up,
Nick,
folks.
just a quick question, or no, just a comment. I caught part of your show last night on stocks. Interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's Wall Street Hackers. Actually, Peter does most of that work. I have to.
Good job, Peter.
But
a good
we'll
show.
Good show.
see you guys all next week.
I
We gotta
like
go.
him.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.